of the many things that makes Florida and our country so beautiful is its multiracial character. However, right now, inequity exists, and we need to do our part in sharing stories of implicit bias and unconscious stereotypes based on race, with the goal of eliminating disruptive behavior and creating inclusive societies. Hi, everyone. I'm Rita Barreto Kraig, Chair of the Florida Commission on the Status of Women. Thank you so much for joining us here today. The Commission is a nonpartisan group of 22 women throughout the state of Florida, all dedicated to creating an awareness, understanding, and appreciation of the many challenges faced by women. It was created in 1991 as a nonpartisan organization. And it is our belief that the Commission is stronger and more responsive when you get involved. Today, we put together a panel who will share heartfelt experiences. It's a panel that will share stories when they were treated differently, and the only reason was because of the color of their skin. Everyone has a right to live and work an environment free from all forms of discrimination. We hope that you learn from this panel, and we hope and challenge you to do your part in eliminating discrimination, stereotypes, and inappropriate behavior. Right now, I'd like to turn over the panel to Commissioner Karen Hoffman, who will facilitate this impactful conversation.
Great. We are so honored to, as the Florida Commission on the Status of Women, to bring together today this amazing panel of phenomenal leaders, women leaders, and in their respective fields, to really talk about what is going on today and a woman's heart affected by the turbulent times that we're really experiencing currently. And we reached out, and each of these leaders have said, listen, I'm gonna step forward and let's have a conversation, and an honest conversation, and possibly ways that we can even impact change. So as my name is Commissioner Karen Hoffman. I was appointed by Attorney General Pam Bondi, and we are representative with 22 commissioners in the Commission on the Status of Women. Each of us are appointed either by the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the Governor, and the Cabinet of the state of Florida. We're here because women have amazing influence and ideas and ability to really evoke change in a positive way. And our heart desire is to have a great conversation here where those ideas might even emanate from, that we can make a difference even today moving forward, not only within the state of Florida, but even throughout the nation. So we are thrilled and honored for each of these women. I'm so eager to introduce you to the leaders that have come forward today. So, and with that, I would like to start, and I'm going to introduce each of the panelists that are with us, and we'll have this conversation with each of them. Today with us is Keisha Burton, Assistant Chief of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and founder of Tisha's Hand Incorporated. She's a 20-year veteran of Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. In the 200 years of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, she is the 4th Black female police sergeant, 2nd Black female lieutenant, and 4th Black female assistant chief. She is also the first female of the Police Athletic League executive director in 45 years. She currently is the zone commander in patrol. She's also founder of a nonprofit called Tisha's Hands, dedicated to helping those in need. She's happily married to Greg Burton, 5 children and 5 grandchildren. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. Also with us is Dr. Harris. Dr. Patrice Harris is the immediate past president of the American Medical Association. She's a psychiatrist from Atlanta and was the 174th president of the American Medical Association and the organization's first African-American woman to hold this position. We're thrilled to have you with us here today. Dr. Harris has a diverse experience as a private practicing physician, public health administrator, patient advocate, and medical society lobbyist. A fellow in the American Psychiatric Association, Dr. Harris continues in private practice and currently consults with both public and private organizations in health service delivery and emerging trends in practice and health policy. She's an adjunct assistant professor in the Emory Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and an adjunct clinical assistant professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Morehouse School of Medicine. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you here. Also with us here in Florida is Stacey, Campbell, Dominic, President and CEO of CareerSource Polk. She serves as the President and CEO for CareerSource Polk. In this role, she leads workforce system consisting of 2 full-service career centers, a mobile unit, and administrative office and employer services division within the 4th largest county and landmass in Florida. Stacey joined Polk Workforce 2020 as the assistant director, and within 2 years was promoted to the program director, where she remained for 4 years before her appointment as president and CEO of CareerSource Polk, formerly Polk Works, in September 2006. Stacey is very involved in the community, acts as a catalyst in forming successful relationships with vital businesses and education partners. Stacey, we're thrilled to have you here today. Also with us, and I'm honored to even serve on the commission together with Commissioner Sophia Eccleston. She is the External Affairs Manager at Florida Power and Light. She is also a veteran and just an amazing leader there, and again, honored to serve with you on the commission. As External Affairs Manager in Palm Beach County, Sophia is responsible for advocating with local elected officials and key community stakeholders on behalf of FP&L. Prior to joining External Affairs Division, she worked as a solar developer, developing large-scale solar projects located in DeSoto, Manatee, Charlotte counties. Phenomenal. In 2019, she was also appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis to the newly formed Florida Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission. She currently serves as president of the board of the Homeless Coalition in Palm Beach County. She's a board member for Executive Women of the Palm Beaches Foundation, Palm Beach County Homeless Advisory Board, Florida Women's Business Center, and Boca Raton Chamber of Commerce. She is also a member of Impact 100 of Palm Beach County. Thank you for joining us today. And also our final panelist is Commissioner Lady Deanna Ziegler, our immediate past chair of the Florida Commission on the Status of Women. And she's also a member of the Board of Directors for Florida Tax Watch. She's currently the president and CEO of Z Creators. Dr. Ziegler has worked in the field of higher education and technology for more than 35 years, having served as a Garth Reeves Eminent Scholar Endowed Chair of Excellence and Interim Dean for this School of Journalism and Graphic Communication at Florida A&M, FAMU. Prior to joining FAMU, Dr. Ziegler was Professor of Broadcasting for 14 years at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Associate Director for Diversity Resources and Educational Services. She's a charter inductee to the University of Tennessee African American Hall of Fame. During her tenure at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, she was president of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, chair of the Commission for Blacks, chair of the Commission of Women, and is the only African American ever elected president of the Faculty Senate in the school's history in 1994, and she still holds that honor to this very day. Additionally, she served as the chair of the State Tennessee Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. She is also co-chair of higher education to the Tennessee Legislative Black Caucus. We are honored to have you here today with us, Dr. Ziegler. So tonight, we are going to have just a great discussion on issues that have been going on in the past couple weeks, and we wanted to bring together this phenomenal group of panelists to hear your ideas and your insights, and also share from your personal experiences. So thank you for being here with us, each of you panelists. Keisha Burton, tonight, and I wanted to just make sure that we just appreciate your service too to the community as well in Jacksonville. With what has been happening here in this nation in this past couple weeks, you yourself, have you ever experienced personally the racism in any form through childhood throughout? Would you like to share about that?
Yes, first of all, thank you. I want to thank the commission for having me, and I'm excited to be on this panel with these accomplished women. So I thought about that question, and how I want to answer that is that I think I tell people a lot of times that I was exposed to racism before I even knew really my alphabet. You know, being around, raised with my grandparents, watching how they interacted with the white community, and how my grandfather had to navigate, you know, through life at an early age, them having that conversation early on with me before I even understood and seeing it. And I remember when I was young, my friend of mine gave me a white baby doll, and my grandmother, she was so upset about it. And I remember being hurt. But a lot of the things that they taught me, I think that they had good intentions, and they were trying to protect me and also get me prepared for what was to come when I grew up. So, so have I experienced racism? Absolutely. My entire life, pretty much, from a personal standpoint, from being a mother, from being in law enforcement. So I think I've been able to navigate through it because I was taught at an early age how to do that.
It's interesting because it is interesting. Families come around together to help you through that and through the generations. So your grandmother, your mom, onto you. As a mother, how have you had those conversations with your children? You have 5.
Yes, yes. And I've been having these conversations, and people are shocked that when I say that I have this conversation with my sons. I have 3 Black sons. And what I tell people, before I was a police officer, I've been a Black woman and I'm a Black mother, and I have these concerns. And as it relates to police officers, you have 99% of police officers that are good, but that 1%, I don't want my son engaging with or coming in contact with that officer. So I've always had that conversation, whether they were driving or they're walking in the community. It's just has been a part of my nature. And obviously, being in law enforcement for 21 years, I've seen some of everything. So I'm extra, you know, alert and trying to educate my sons every chance I get.
How do you have that conversation with your son? And I'm sure it breaks your heart to even have that first conversation. How did that go?
Yeah, I'm just very, you know, truthful with him. You know, I tell him that, you know, you may be judged by the color of your skin. You may be stopped when other people are not stopped. It's just a real authentic conversation, and depending on the situation, if he's going somewhere or if he's in school or, you know, just in life generally speaking, it's just always been a constant conversation. My 17-year-old just started driving last week. And the first thing I told him, you know, obviously don't let anybody get in the car with you. But if you are pulled over, I told him you remain respectful, you put your hands on the steering wheel, and you follow the instructions. And it's just real. You know, it's a real, you know, fear that I have that that 1%. I've been here in Jacksonville for 21 years, and I was here riding alongside my partner who murdered a man on duty here in Jacksonville. So you just never know where that 1% is, and I don't want my son to be in that 1%.
Yeah, you share about the concern. That concern never goes away as a mother from that standpoint. Has it just been amplified in the past couple weeks?
Yes, I tell you, when I saw the opportunity and the title of this, The Heart of a Mother, I definitely I want to come on and talk to everyone, not as a police officer, but as a mother. I think it was a combination of Ahmaud and then, you know, Floyd, just so closely together, and being in this uniform. I'm a part of the Black community, but I'm a thread of law enforcement, and being out there when the riot started. I tell you, I was broken. I was confused because, you know, it's a dichotomy, right? That people hate you and they love you, and it's like we've been in the middle. Okay, so I'm a police officer, but I am a part of the Black community. So I understand their cries, their frustrations, because I've been living with that as well. But also I see the law enforcement piece as well, because we have to keep the peace. And you have so many good officers out here. So it's just really taking a toll like never before.
I can't even fathom the two worlds that you're living in right now, currently, even from that standpoint. And we are so grateful for your service. With that, you have a unique experience, life experience. What recommendation would you make if there was anything that you could say, this would make a difference? Something that you, as a mother and as a in law enforcement, is there a recommendation that you would make that you feel like this can make a difference?
Yes, how much time do we have? So I narrowed it down. I thought about, my personal experience. I'm a survivor of childhood sex abuse. So I've been living with that trauma of that and using it for good. So I'm all about having conversations. So what I would say is that for leaders, managers, supervisors, is to create this space where people feel comfortable, where they can come and share and be vulnerable and share these life experiences. Because until we get to the point where we're listening to each other and understand each other's perspectives and views, it's just hard to appreciate or respect their views. And so I've been seeing that happening even at work with my officers. We all come from different backgrounds, different life experiences. So some of them don't understand, like, what's going on? What is this thing about Black Lives Matter? Why is this? Why is this and that? So we're all sitting down. We're starting to have this conversation, and they're saying, wow, I didn't know it. So I think it's important that leadership really creates this atmosphere, and that will change this culture, especially in law enforcement. It's male dominant, and they think because you share, you talk, that you're weak. It's not a sign of weakness. And we need to get rid of that idea that if we share our feelings and our intimate experiences, that somehow we are not strong or brave. Matter of fact, it's just the opposite. So I just think that we should not stray away from this real conversation. I see it happening. So I think that a lot of good is going to come out of it. I have a lot of my diverse friends are saying, Keisha, what can I do? I want to know how I can help. But even after we have these conversations, each one of us leave with, what can I do personally to make a change? So I think that we all have an opportunity to grow.
One word that has really resonated through this conversation with you is authentic, and having the authentic conversation. And that is really help making a change individually when you have those real conversations. Keisha, thank you for your time and just great insights. Dr. Patrice Harris, American Medical Association, media past president. You have, this has been on the radar, and you have really made tremendous contributions in your leadership and in your role. But right now, in your farewell address, just this last week, you alluded to the men in your family and how you worried for their safety and the safety of men of color in the world that we live in. You gave a very powerful statement for the AMA in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Could you talk a little bit more about this and what this issue means to you? And then also that impact into the brown and Black communities. And we really appreciate your insights on this.
Well, thank you. And let me say, I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank the Commission for the invitation, and thank all you very talented Florida women for letting your neighbor from the north join you. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. And yes, just not even a week ago, I had the opportunity to give my farewell address, my last address as president of the American Medical Association. It certainly has been a wonderful year. And in that address, I talked about the good work of the American Medical Association over this past year regarding COVID, regarding our efforts around health equities. But I also wanted to make sure that I amplified something that was both personal but public, something that we see every day. So at the AMA, we are really serious about our inaugurations. It is a black tie affair. And one of my favorite pictures from the inauguration last June was a picture of the men in my family who were able to attend the inauguration. And they were all dressed up in their tuxedos. From my cousin, the youngest member, who's in the 8th grade, an outstanding scholar athlete, to my great uncle, who's a World War II veteran. That group also included another cousin who is a police officer. And I shared, of course, everyone had a wonderful time, and my family was so warmly welcomed as we celebrated inside the Hyatt Regency in Chicago. But I thought it was important to note that when the men in my family were outside of the walls of a hotel, not dressed in tuxedos, they were at risk. They were at risk of driving or jogging or breathing. Really wanted to bring in the recent episodes, again, mentioned here in Georgia, but really episodes that have happened for many years. And so I thought it was important to amplify that so that we can begin to have the conversation about police brutality, but about broader health inequities. And so I am glad that you found that moving. I've received really good feedback, and I know it's so important for me personally and for the AMA to really amplify these issues.
Well, you bring that into the focus, and we appreciate your leadership in doing so. You also mentioned the inequities that are happening in the Black and Brown communities, both in health, and you've seen that in the past a few months during COVID, but overall, even from that standpoint, what are some of the ways some of that can be overcome? What do you see as opportunities there?
So clearly, COVID-19 has brought into stark relief health inequities. Now, probably many of us on this panel today were not surprised because these health inequities existed pre-COVID. We had Black and Brown communities suffering disproportionately from hypertension, diabetes, maternal mortality, infant mortality, higher death rates from some cancers, not having access to affordable, meaningful health insurance. So COVID-19 just brought that into stark relief and certainly exacerbated further health inequities. We've seen with COVID, Black and Brown people dying at disproportionate rates. And then on top of that, again, the recent episodes of violence against Black men and women in our community, of course, not all by police. Mr. Arbery here in Georgia was murdered and not by police. And so the question is, what are we going to do about it? Now, the good news, I believe, if there is a silver lining, is we are talking about it. And we are looking at the data regarding these health disparities right now, because I've talked to some of my colleagues, and we say typically it's an afterthought that we talk about these health inequities. We gather the data later. We suddenly find later after the pandemic, oh my goodness, Black people were disproportionately impacted. And so we are collecting the data. I have to say the AMA early on called on HHS and CDC to collect the data, and now I believe almost all the states are collecting the data. So now that we have the data, we will need to continue to collect the data, but the question is, will we have the resolve and the commitment to do something about it? At the AMA, we have a Center for Health Equity, and we certainly plan to lead, but this is not the health communities alone to solve. That's why I'm so glad. I know there's a diverse audience here, but this is an all of community effort if we are going to address the structural determinants of health, which include racism and policies, discriminatory housing policies, people living in food deserts, poverty. And so it's really going to take everyone to look at longstanding policies to address this issue, to make sure that there's equitable health care, and transportation and all of the determinants of health. But at the AMA, we certainly plan to lead that conversation. And I hope that when we get to the other side of the pandemic and when we get to the other side of the height of concern around police brutality, we all have to make a commitment to continue the conversation.
And the conversation is imperative. Need to take it from being a conversation to action plan. Is there a recommendation on a medical area, but also for us as women in our neighborhoods, in our communities, is a recommendation that you have for each of us so that we can make a difference to make it better?
Well, I would say get engaged and get involved and make sure that every entity you are involved with is looking at, first of all, any policies, any practices that may contribute further to health and equity, certainly on an individual basis, of course. And by the way, the women, I think women already know this, women make the majority of health decisions for families. But you know what, that is a burden. And this is what I think is part of this conversation. African Americans, Black women are not a monolith. I'm happy to hear what the other panelists think, but I will tell you, I think there's a tipping point. And we, at least, let me just speak for me, I'm willing to have these conversations. I know for the course of my career, I've been the only and been very strategic, and we always have to be strategic in having the conversations. But I think that, at least for me, I'm no longer going to edit my conversations. If I see an issue, I'm going to raise the issue, raise it in the spirit of working on it, in the spirit of developing partnerships. And so certainly it is up to each of us, and we can manage our own health, but we cannot blame individuals for 400 years of policies and practices that have led to where we are today. I'm involved in a group in Atlanta, and it's called, and we talk a lot about inverting the burden. And so that's why I continue to say, you know, we have to look at our own systems and structures that we are part of, do and complete an assessment to see if in any way possible we are contributing further to health inequities and implicit biases. And again, physicians in the medical community, we will do that. The AMA will lead on that. But again, it is up to all of us to be engaged in the conversation.
That's where I believe that we as women, that's one of our strong points, is that we're fantastic collaborators and working together as a coalition and bringing together women that, hey, we can make a difference. So I appreciate your recommendation on that, because you're right. We are stronger working together, and there's better ideas coming together as a whole, as opposed to just trying to handle it single-handedly. So thank you. Thank you so much for your insights on that and what you're doing and your leadership, continued leadership, and making a difference. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Through this discussion, we have fantastic panelists covering every different type of industry. We are talking about law enforcement and health. Stacey, Campbell, Dominic, we're thrilled to have you because of your involvement with business and really connecting talent and industry together. But I'm sure that there is challenges that you have encountered, not just in the past couple of weeks, but in the past years, of some of those obstacles that you're having to try and to connect the talent industry together. Could you share some of those obstacles and how you've helped industry overcome that?
Sure. So when we talk about workforce, of greatest concern to me is how the pendulum swings back and forth when we're talking about a great economy or not so good economy and the unemployment rate. One of the things that I've noticed over the course of the years, when we have a bad economy, certainly that impacts people's jobs, but at a far greater rate for African Americans than anyone else. When it's time to lay off, I see a significant number of minorities who were laid off immediately and first. And when the economy begins to rebound and you have low unemployment and the challenge of employers who want to recruit workers, I constantly hear employers say, there's nobody out there. We don't have anybody. We don't have any talent. But the unemployment rate for African Americans, and especially African American men, is still quite high. So it's very disconcerting to me when I know, I say, okay, we're at 4% unemployment rate, but that's different for, once again, African Americans. So the overall unemployment rate may be 4%. Not now, I'm just saying in general.
Right.
And employers say they can't find the talent. But we spend a significant amount of time preparing people for the workforce and interviewing and having those same conversations that I have with my two sons about dressing appropriately and communicating effectively and presenting yourself well. And yet you still see the disparity. You see the disparity, and just for me, one of the things that I notice is, one of the many things that I've noticed in the workforce is that we as African American women, not that it's a bad thing, but we rise to greater heights quicker than our African American men. And we make up more of the minority of the workforce when we compare ourselves to the African American male. And I just think that that's a very that doesn't just affect the workforce. That affects homes. That affects my home. When I talk to my boys, my young men, my husband just happens to be an attorney, and we talk a lot about the things that he sees when he's in the courtrooms and things of that nature, and how the impact of jobs and the lack thereof, or the lack of the availability of quality jobs for African American men, and the impact that it has on choices that young men make early on that affect their future. So I will say that it's, I have worked with many employers who have certainly the best interest in trying to make sure that they understand in interviews, the people who are sitting across from them that they're interviewing, because we typically hire people who are like us or who share some kind of similarities. And my advice that I give to many of the employers who seek me out about diversifying their workforce is, you have to recognize what panel you're putting before the interviewees. Because we can only make decisions based on the mindset that we have, but when we have a diverse panel around us, you can have dialogue about people, because we have a perception of individuals when they walk into the room. And sometimes that perception overshadows the presentation of how someone is interviewing and presenting their best self. So, it's disheartening. It's an ongoing effort to try to communicate the talent that's available. I know one of the questions you asked earlier of Keisha, and I was hoping you would ask me this, is, have you experienced racism? And in my job, I have, but I didn't think it was that until I thought about it later, and it's challenging being a CEO and seeing the disparities. And when it's time to hire and a whole pool of candidates look like me, I ask the question, do they look like me because these are the people who have been laid off and have been unemployed at these large numbers? Or is it because they're looking for someone who looks like them, thinking they would get a fair shot at job opportunities?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is the next question I was going to, exactly that, because of your role in business. When is it that you've experienced that yourself? When you what you alluded to it. Did you want to expand on that when it dawned on you later?
So it was a couple of times. When I first got into this role in workforce development, because I came out of higher education, okay. And I ended up in Florida from Mississippi out of graduate school. Let me leave my hands down. Sorry about that. So I remember I was in business services here, and I remember getting a call from an employer who said, listen, my turnover rate is 75%, and I need some help. And I heard that I could contact you all and you could help me. And I said, absolutely. He said, I posted some jobs with you all, but listen, I need you to send me some qualified candidates. Don't send me any Black people because they don't want to work. And don't send me any old people. And I said, so what exactly are you looking for? Well, you can send me some Hispanics because they're good with their hands and they'll work as long as we need them to work. And I said, okay. I said, well, let me just share with you. I want to know what talent you're looking for. What skill set are you looking for? What jobs you're trying to fill? And I said, you know what? Maybe we don't need to talk about this over the phone. I would love to come and meet you.
Good for you.
And after we had a meeting, we scheduled a meeting, and I went out and drove to the gentleman's site, and I walked in, and the receptionist at the front desk, I said, I'm Stacey Campbell Dominic. I'm here to see this gentleman, the general manager. And she looked at me and she said, okay, I'll let him know you're here. And when I was walking back to go to his office, he just looked so stunned. And we sat down, but I will say that it was a very interesting conversation. This gentleman had an experience with one Black male, and he painted the picture that every Black male would respond or not work or whatever it was that he experienced with him. But from that point forward, I will tell you that this gentleman had been one of the most, I guess, perpetual users of the workforce system and recruiting talent. And not only that, calling to say, can you send me another guy like him? It was interesting. But I didn't think about that at first, but I felt like, let me just go meet him, because he didn't realize, he said he didn't realize over the phone that I was African American, and he didn't mean to offend me. And I said, I wasn't offended. I was curious. You need to know, that when you're looking for talent, it really doesn't matter what color it comes in. You want somebody who's qualified for your job. So we had a very long conversation about that and had a long-standing relationship over the years. So
that is a game changer. That approach, it changes the culture of the mindset, not only with that gentleman, but I'm sure within his whole company. And then that story is being told even more so. You have, you've changed the course of the trajectory, really. So that is a phenomenal story on how you really evoke the change on that. But for you, even now in this this time right now, what would you recommend with your expertise as a mother, as a expert in business and connecting? What would you recommend right now as a change? Your example of your story is phenomenal, but to do that as an individual. But we're looking to you. What idea do you have?
So for me, it's personal. I would love to tell you what I would recommend for business. That's a tough road. I have a balance because I have 2 African-American young men in my household, young sons. My husband is African-American as well. But the balance I have to strike is I also have a young daughter. And to watch her experience what's going on, and she's very sensitive, it's difficult because we don't want the conversation to center around how you need to act around police officers. We want our conversation to be about family and getting together and enjoying each other and spending time together and not having to text my family and say, Black woman traveling to Georgia at midnight to visit my son the next morning. I'll let you know when I get there. And that has been a text that I've sent. Black woman traveling to Mississippi to see my son at Mississippi State. I'll be there by 8 a.m. I'll let you know when I get there.
Mm.
So it truly is a balance, because I think that the things that we are dealing with now that have kind of exploded, the lasting impact could be mental health issues for our children, because they don't want to be here. They don't want to be a part of this divisive conversation. They have lost friends. My daughter has been in tears about when she was in middle school last year, but now she's in high school and how she's lost some friends. And because of political conversations and other conversations, and I've said to her, you all don't need to be having these conversations in the classroom. You need to be enjoying your high school years. So it's very difficult for me to focus on the workplace when I go into my house and I have a daughter who needs more attention. She has two older brothers and they have their own minds. They know what they want to do. The conversation I have with them, and I would tell any mother who has sons who are who think they know everything. And with my husband being an attorney, it's a little bit more difficult. But we just had a family Zoom call yesterday, and the lasting conversation I had with them, with the young men on the call, is a trial is for the courtroom. We need you to live through that. We need you to live to get to that. So you don't have a trial on the street when you're talking about being pulled over by a police officer and you're challenging them because you think you know the law. You just get home. And when you get home, we can talk about things that didn't happen right and what needs to happen after that.
Excellent. I'm sorry that you're having to have these conversations, and thrilled that they have a mother that is having the authentic conversations and showing that love, to your family that way. We're, again, for the reason why we're having this conversation here tonight. Thank you very much, Stacey, and I appreciate you sharing your experiences. Today also, we're thrilled with having Commissioner Eccleston. And Sophia, you and is honored, like I said, to serve with you, and also Lady D. You have a son, a Black man, who is living right now here in America. In these past couple weeks, your heart very heavy, as with the rest of our panelists as well. Can you share some of the fears that you have personally, if you're willing to, of what goes on daily, and as a mother, can you share with us?
Sure. So I can tell you, when the incident with George Floyd first happened, I'm not a crier, but I watched that video and I cried. And I tell you, I cried because I imagined if that was my son, that's somebody else, that's somebody's son. And I can just imagine if that was my son, because I have a 23-year-old son who is no longer at home. I used to say it was so much better when he was home, because at least I could control where he goes. And, when he was younger, I could go with him wherever he goes. When you're a parent and your kid leaves home, that's the most stressful time for you. I would tell you, my son went away to college, and when he came home, I wouldn't sleep at night when he was here if he would go out. Every day I worry about my son, even before this incident happened. And I tell you why, because he is a Black man growing up in America. And it doesn't matter. My son and I have lived all over the world. We've traveled all over the world, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's educated. It doesn't matter that he's a smart kid. It doesn't matter the upbringing he has. If he gets pulled over by the wrong cop at the wrong time, he could be the next George Floyd. And that really scared me. And every day I send a text to my son, and he knows we don't have to talk every day. It's just a text that says, I'm doing a pulse check, and he knows what that means. I shouldn't have to do that. I serve this country. I'm a veteran, yet I don't feel safe in this country. And I worry for the life of my son every single day. And that's a terrible feeling. And no mother should ever feel that way.
And as a veteran, fear is not something that comes by you naturally.
No. But this is tough.
Have you had some interesting dialogues with your son growing up that you didn't believe that you would have to, but would you be able to share some of that?
Sure. So, I'm always talking to my son, just like what Stacey said earlier, about what happens when you get pulled over. Don't try to argue with the police, and again, and I'm gonna, echo something was said earlier. Not all cops are bad, you know, and I make sure my son understands that. I have a lot of police officers who are my friends, you know, but there are a few bad ones. And I do believe that racism starts at home. It's really taught. And I share a story with you. I was in Washington, D.C. in the African American Museum with my son, and he shared a story with me. And my son, 99% of his friends doesn't look like him. And my son said to me, you know, Mom, and he mentioned his friend's name. When we first became friends, he shared with me that he was always afraid of Black people. He always had these negative connotations for about Blacks. And my son says, why? And it was because of the way he was raised. And he said to my son, but you've changed that for me. And I said, you know, kudos to that kid for to being vulnerable to even share something like that. And kudos to my son for, you know, acknowledging that and didn't judge him by it, but accepted that he had some weaknesses, right? I think that racism starts in the home. And, you know, we've been dealing with this for, you know, not myself personally, but Americans, because I'm from Jamaica, for over 400 years. And, you know, the reason why you're seeing differences now, especially with the younger generation, is because these kids now have a mind of their own. And they're not, you know, even though their parents may have, you know, taught them a certain way, they're going out there and they're having friends who are Blacks or brown, and they're seeing that, hey, what I was taught is not true. You know, not all Blacks are bad, not all Blacks are criminals, you know, and it's unfortunate that we have to live in a society where we constantly have to prove ourselves. We constantly have to work harder. We constantly have to, you know, you go into a store and someone is constantly following you. I mean, I went into a supermarket and just asked to buy, you know, a certain type of oil. And I asked the lady, can you tell me where I find truffle oil? And she looked at me and says, truffle oil? And I said, yes. And she's like, that's a very expensive oil. Well, I didn't ask you if it was expensive. I asked you, where do I find it? You know, and people don't understand. It's not just the police. You know, we keep focusing on the police because these are the videos that we're seeing, but it's happening in the workplace. It's happening in the supermarket. It's happening in the grocery store. It's happening in your everyday life. And no one understands because they're seeing what's going on right now with the police officers. They're thinking, oh my God, you know, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with it every day of our lives in every situation that we have to deal with. And so, it's just sad, and we definitely need to have change. So I have those discussions with my son, and I explain to him that not everyone is bad, not all cops are bad, not all whites are racist, and I explain to him, you know, the history, and I explain to him how he has to behave. And at the end of the day, you know, like Stacey said, the goal is to make it home, because if you make it home, today's a good day, but tomorrow is another day that you have to worry about.
You mentioned that there are, and I appreciate your, you know, sharing the vulnerability of, you know, each day the struggle. It's not, you know, not just compartmentalized to a period of time, but that you're dealing with this on a daily basis. What recommendations do you have for us as women to be agents of change now and every day moving forward? What do you recommend?
I say for one, we start to have the conversation. I know it's a very uncomfortable conversation, but I think that we need to start having these conversations. And you know, and as white women, especially, I think that you got to look deep in yourself and say, you know, what am I doing that's creating part of this problem? What are the conversations that I'm having with my kids? You know, what are some of the things that subconsciously you may be doing or saying that you're not even aware that you're saying it? I think we got to start having those conversations with ourselves. And, you know, I've had friends who have reached out and say, what can I do? I don't have the solution. I don't have all the answers, but I think that we got to start talking about it. We got to start looking at how we can, you know, communicate, have conversations with the police, with, you know, with the community. And we got to see what can we do to help make change with the police? What can we do in the community to help change some of the behaviors that we have in the community? And we have to start having those serious conversations, and we got to start electing leaders who are going to be standing up for issues that affect Black Americans in this country. And we have to vote for people who are going to make change. And if they don't make change, we got to change them. And we got to keep doing that, because I tell you, every time you listen to some type of political pundit, they're always talking about the Black and brown votes. We got to let them stop depending on the Black and brown votes, and we got to start demanding what we need. And if we don't get it, we got to change things.
And we are grateful for the electoral process that we have in this nation, you know, and it's a representative form of government. And, you know, we forget that. We forget, you know, and
absolutely
the power of the vote is amazing. So especially in, you know, this year and every year, but even on a local level. I mean, sometimes we think just, you know, elections on a local.
We got to start on the local level. We got to start on the local level, because we're the ones who are electing these district attorneys, who are sending these Black men to prison. I can tell you, I have my undergrad is in criminal justice, and when I was working on my undergrad, I did a paper on the prison system. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of Black men that are in prison, that the time that they're given for the crime that they commit just don't match it, and that's the problem in our system. I mean, we have a systematic issue when we build prisons in this country based on the third grade reading level. That is an issue, and who struggles in the most in this country with reading levels? Black and brown kids.
One thing
something has to change.
Yeah. And so in the education, we're going to get into that also. But before moving into education, Sophia, what I appreciate too about you and your relationship with elected officials on a local level, you have that relationship. And so you're able to impact that change. What would you encourage us as women to do in relationships with elected officials? Being able to, connect with them, know them, to have the conversation with them. What's your recommendation?
I say you reach out to your elected official and tell them to take a look at what's been going on in this country and how can we make change. And we need each and every one of them to look at how they can impact change in their community. It starts in the community. And so I think, if everyone reach out to their elected official and say, we got to change something. This cannot happen. This is our community. This is the community of Black, white, brown, everyone, and we have to make it a community where everyone feels safe. I mean, when you go to bed at night, Karen, you can lay and you don't have to worry about it because you don't have a Black man out there. No mother should have to fear sleeping at night. I can tell you, I mean, if my phone goes off in the middle of the night, I jump, I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? I mean, and it's really bad because if my son calls me too late at night or too early in the morning, I think something is wrong. The fact that you have to think that, and he's just like, no, Mom, I'm just calling you to talk. I'm just checking on you. The fact that you live with that anxiety every day, every single day, no mother should ever have to live like that. And it's not something that you just wish away. It's there. You can't change that. It's just that Black Americans live with this anxiety and this fear every single day. And imagine the mental issues that it creates for us. Imagine the health issues that it creates for us. It's a problem that we have to look at and that we have to address. And I think if every woman reaches out to their elected official and really give them the breakdown and, like I said, the dirty of it, and say we need change, and that change needs to come from starting at the local level all the way up. But it doesn't. You can't just have Blacks saying we need change. We need everyone coming together and say we need change.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. And I appreciate you sharing too about the facts regarding the statistics regarding the third grade reading level. And that's a communication that we can have back with our school board members at every level. That's imperative. That's how critical that is. Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you for sharing your heart and your passion and just the fears that go on daily. And Dr. Lady Diahann Ziegler, with your realm and your expertise in higher education, Sophia just alluded to that, but education is a really key component. From that standpoint, you've dealt with challenges on all levels, and we appreciate your leadership with that. But you when you were working at HBCU, FAMU, or even a predominantly white university at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, have you seen the role of education have a significant role in race relations?
Well, first of all, let me the woman's heart, and my heart heavy, and I knew it was going to be a rough conversation, but it's heavy now listening to all of it. Systematic racism is systems of exclusion are real. And as Sophia alluded to, the first education that young people learn, even before they get to institutions of higher education, is in their homes, is in church. And then they come to school. And in many cases, they never even meet a person of color. Okay, there are still some schools out there where they never have to meet a person such as myself. Higher education institutions, as far as I'm concerned, have failed. They have failed in their curriculum. They have failed in their inability to teach about race and culture. Our books do not include the contributions of African Americans and many people of color. I can say HBCUs, yes, they do a better job, but public education still has to follow a certain common core. They still have to use certain textbooks that are prescribed that matches what is supposedly needed as education and experience to get a degree. My experiences at the University of Tennessee, I was the first and only African-American professor in the College of Communications there. Those of us who have been the first and only have carried a heavy load. Okay, the expectations on us, I mean, the compromises that have to be made, and also the sort of expectation that you're going to act in a certain way. I was a young woman from New York City, you know, who learned socialization riding on the subway. So I didn't even know or even think about the fact that you should not go and talk about race relations when I'm seeing only 5% of students in a 42,000 University of Tennessee, only 5% were Black students, when only a small percentage of faculty were tenured. Okay, so I went out there and I talked about it. I used the same medium of television. I was a broadcast journalist, and I talked about it on television and embarrassed the institution over and over and over again. How I got on the commission, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, is because I gave testimony about the racism at the university and in the community, and they asked me to join the panel. Okay, but it did not go without risk. I got hate calls. I got threatened. My mother used to come down and beg the dean to please don't let the Ku Klux Klan get her child, because Pulaski, Tennessee, where the Klan started, was only a few hours away. That mindset was reeking all over the place. The students that I taught, I would have maybe one African-American student in a class at a time. They had never even had to deal with a person in authority. Okay, but I knew that I had to be professional, I had to do my job, and I had to be twice as good. I was tenured a year early. I made full professor right after that. There was no way I could keep up with those antics and not be at risk. They would have crucified me. I saw it happen to my colleagues. Okay, so at FAMU, while I don't have kids, I still had to have the talk, because we can't take this off. We live with it, as Sophia says, every single day. You go into various situations smiling because you're the leader. You have to be the example when you are painting inside. So I would have to give the talk to the students about homecoming is going to be coming. You know, they're going to follow you around in the stores. They're going to put more police out on the street. It didn't happen with Florida State's homecoming, but it was a reality. When FAMU homecoming happened, there were more police out, more kids arrested, so on and so forth. I even had a student tell me that she was told, she worked in the mall, and she was told to follow African Americans around in the stores because they're going to steal. Okay, so, you know, having said all of that, because there is no foundation of education that you learn from nursery school through higher education, unless perhaps you attend an HBCU, you never know about the contributions of African Americans. Very few people know that John Thompson, chairman of Microsoft, is a graduate of FAMU. Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta is a graduate of FAMU. There are many people who have made incredible contributions to this world, scientists, authors, business people that are out there that people never read about, never know about, they've never been taught about. And not only white people, but Black people. I had to teach my students every year about Max Robinson, the first Black network TV anchorman. I had to teach them about Diahann Carroll, who was a single parent nurse in the 1950s, unheard of, did not match the stereotypes of that particular time, and was on television. The producers were not supposed to hire her. They were supposed to hire a white woman to play that role, but someone took a risk. So that's the other part. We have to take risk, even the leadership in education, to go against the realm. I've done it much and I have suffered for it, but I will do it over and over again and still continue to do it in any door that I get through, because the expectation that I have for myself and for my nieces and nephews and for those who come behind me is to do it well. I tell them, you show up, you show out, and you be professional.
Fantastic. You know, when with that, you have, with all of your experiences, Lady D, what are some things that you would like to see, and one thing that you'd like to see happen in this movement, in this country, that could really make a change? What would you recommend?
First of all, let me say I'm encouraged to see the people who are out there in the movement, all races, all cultures, ages, etc. I'm a product of the 60s, even though I was not out there protesting because I was too young. But I watched policies change. Okay, we had only television then. We have social media now that has made this movement global all around the world. So I do believe that we still need some policy changes, but even more importantly, we have to change hearts and minds. We have to educate. We have to take people such as yourself as leaders. You know, we live with this. We're the voices all the time. And that is what has encouraged me in this movement, that there are now other voices out there. In of course, we got the civil rights movement. But in 1968, the Kerner Commission report that was formed, it was formed because Blacks on television were depicted as rioters and criminals. etc. So the commission examined and found that the media was shockingly backwards in the depiction. I wish I could say that we have grown and we're still not shockingly backwards in the depiction of African Americans. Let me give you an example. When I was on my Fulbright in China, they kept thinking I was from India. They kept asking me if I were from India because I did not fit the stereotype that they had seen on television. If we didn't have cameras, okay, if we didn't have more of the programs that we have now, although I still don't think we have enough to give us an idea of our total culture, of all of the women that you see here. Where are they in our media and our shows? Okay, so we have to have some policy changes, okay, but we also have to have those systems of exclusion broken down. We have to be at the table. And we have to get past the fear, because for some reason, there is a fear of excellence, okay, as it relates to African Americans. There is a fear that when you come into that room and that show out because you're going to be excellent, that the world is not ready for. Okay, and so I'm encouraged to see the Mayor Bottoms and stuff, and when they come out and when they are so eloquent and talking about the issues, and everybody who's on this panel today, because that's what we need. We need more voices out there, and we need more people open to those voices so that we can help them change their hearts and their minds.
I am so honored just to really even have this conversation tonight with each of you. The wisdom that you're sharing with us. What is remarkable about each one of you is that you have a door that you have not only just open, turn the handle, but you have like pushed doors open. But what I hear by your examples also is that you not only push the door open, but that you are keeping the door open so that others may follow behind you. You're leading, but you're bringing others along with you. And part of that is with that example, with the conversations, how to make cultural changes that are lasting and significant and real. And we cannot thank you enough for each of that. Our hearts go out to each of you. And you know, the mothers that have fearful hearts during this time, and even when things may subside, does not mean that the fear has gone away. We want to use this as an opportunity to encourage, to empower, and to celebrate. And today we are so honored to celebrate each of you and your leadership that you have given, and right now in making a cultural change in our nation to make our nation better. So thank you to each of you in your time, in your efforts, and your continued efforts. And as Commissioner on the status of women for here in the state of Florida, if there's any way that we can continue to be an agent of change, please let us know. The door is open, and we want to make sure that that is made known not only throughout the state of Florida, but throughout the nation. Thank you to each of you all. Thank you.